Hello friends, my name is Stella and I serve as a lay leader here at Nairobi Chapel, Syokimau. I've been entrusted with the responsibility of leading our small groups, which we call life groups. And so community and small groups are something that is close to my heart. In the month of January, we have been going through a sermon series entitled Life on Mission, with 2 Corinthians 5, chapter 14 to 15 as our anchor text. And I'll read it for us. For the love of Christ controls us, because we have concluded this, that one has died for all, therefore all have died, and he died for all, that those who live might no longer live for themselves, but for him who for their sake died and was raised. Today I'm going to talk about community on mission. As an introvert, I've always felt more comfortable in small groups than in large crowds. In a small group, which is typically between 5 and 12 people, you can know others and be known. In a small group, there is time and space to go deep in relationships. Here at Nairobi Chapel, Syokimau, we place a lot of emphasis on our life groups. Our life groups are more than just Bible study fellowships or meetings to have fun. They are an opportunity to walk with other believers in their faith journey for the long term, doing life together. When I talk about a community on mission, I'm reminded of the many one another's of the Bible. These are instructions given by the different disciples on how to relate to one another as believers, which reinforce the idea of no longer living for ourselves. Today, I have some of the one another's that I'd like us to reflect on. The first one is welcome one another. And I'm going to read from Romans chapter 15, verse 7. Therefore, welcome one another as Christ has welcomed you for the glory of God. One of the things we really fear, especially as people living in urban areas, is strangers. The idea of being placed in a group of people that we have not chosen ourselves and have never met, then being expected to love these strangers and open up to them is scary and strange to many of us. But I have seen, not only in this church, but many others that I've belonged to, God creating close bonds between those who started off as strangers, turning them into brothers and sisters with genuine love for one another. And as we have read from our anchor text, the love of Christ compels us to get out of our comfort zones and not only get to know others, but allow them to know us as well. The second is to show hospitality to one another. And 1 Peter chapter 4, verse 9 tells us to show hospitality to one another without grumbling. Inviting people into our homes is not easy. It's costly, and it involves going to quite some trouble to free up our time and make sure our guests are comfortable. It also involves allowing people to see us as we truly are in our home environments. We, as followers of Christ, are expected to open up our homes and host people without grumbling. I remember the first time I lived on my own in Nairobi. I lived in a small one-bedroom apartment in South B down a very dusty road. It was on 4th floor and it was quite a walk up. The leader of the small group that I was part of then asked me one day if I could host, and I found myself saying yes without thinking about it. And then I panicked afterwards. I was asking myself, where are people going to sit? Will the snacks be enough? Will the space be enough? Will I get home from work in good enough time to prepare everything? But I still said yes. And every time after that, whenever I was asked to host, I said yes. Because you know what? That small group had welcomed me with so much love when they didn't know me, when I was a stranger to them. And I wanted to reciprocate that love. And good things happened in that group. We met, we bonded, we laughed, we prayed together, and 2 of my very good friends who are now married met in that small apartment in South B. So whether it's a bedsitter, a cramped apartment, or a mansion, whatever homes you're in are gifts from God. As a community on mission, even our homes are a tool for ministry. And we thank God for the opportunity to host others, because it is an opportunity for ministry. Abraham, the forefather of our faith, was sitting at the door of his tent in Mamre when he saw 3 visitors come. He ran to offer them food and refreshment. Little did he know that these men were angels bearing good news for him and Sarah. Hebrews 13, chapter 13, verse 2 reminds us, do not neglect to show hospitality to strangers, for thereby some have entertained angels unawares. The third one another is serving one another. I'll read from Galatians 5:13, which says, for you are called to freedom, brothers. Only do not use your freedom as an opportunity for the flesh, but through love serve one another. What love is this that causes us to lay down our freedoms and our rights to serve one another? What love is this that causes ordinary people to make extraordinary sacrifices to keep a small church running, to wake up extra early, to crisscross counties, to sacrifice well-paying gigs, to prepare snacks for those serving in church, to give money when the economy is in crisis so that our less fortunate neighbors can eat? It is the love of Christ which compels us to no longer live for ourselves. Romans 12:10 talks about loving one another with brotherly affection and giving preference to one another or honoring one another. This is a kind of love that the world needs to see. This world whose motto is me first and every man for himself. When the world sees us sacrificially loving and serving one another, it shows that we belong to a different kingdom, the kingdom of God. The fourth one another is bear one another's burdens. And I'll read from Galatians chapter 6, verse 2. Bear one another's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ. God created us to need each other. We are instructed to carry one another's burdens. But how will we carry each other's burdens if we don't even know what the burden is? A community on mission gets into each other's lives. We go past being polite. We want to know what is really happening to each and every one of us. Think of that neighbor in your estate who never leaves the house. Instead of assuming that, they're a hermit or that they don't like people, someone who is in a community on mission would ask themselves, is this neighbor okay? You'd walk up to them, knock on the door, and wait to see. What about that person who you've noticed coming to church a number of times? The one who comes to church and then just before the sermon ends, dashes off. Go up to them, say hi, invite them to be part of something. You and I hold the solutions to someone else's problems, and God made it so. So we must get uncomfortable. We must risk rejection. We must risk embarrassment for the sake of this bearing one another's burdens. And this is not because we are busybodies and that we have nothing better to do, but because the love of Christ urges and compels and pushes us to do so. If your neighbor or work colleague is bereaved, make a point of visiting them and condoling with them. Even if you have nothing to say, honestly, your presence makes a positive difference. Show up when your life group members have something in their lives to celebrate and share their joy. The Apostle Paul in Romans 12:15 tells us to rejoice with those who rejoice and mourn with those who mourn. Sacrifice financially for the sake of meeting another's urgent need. And this is the way we take Christ's love to the hurting, the lonely, and the needy. And this is how the gospel becomes real to them, not just something we read from the Bible. This is how we shine the light of God into the dark places of each other's lives. As Matthew 5:14-16 says, you are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden. Nor do people light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a stand, and it gives light to all in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father who is in heaven. A community on mission is welcoming to strangers, ready to serve one another, show hospitality to one another, and sacrificially bear one another's burdens. Friends, a life without a mission is aimless, frustrating, and tedious. Let's join in and become a community on mission to further God's kingdom on this earth for our joy and His glory. As we say here at Nairobi Chapel, Syokimau, we are better together. And join us today at 8 p.m. in the evening for prayers.